Sex addiction is not about sex, and I really wish they would stop calling it sex addiction. And I say this for two reasons. One, it's a distraction for the addict. It makes them zoom in way too much on the sexual behaviors, which are really just the end result of all of the faulty brain processes. So in a lot of ways, it's a distraction, right? In some ways, it gets them sober, but in other ways, it harms their long-term recovery. The other reason I don't like the term is what it does to their wives, these betrayed partners, right? You hear the word sex addiction, it does them no favors, right? Because these poor partners, they're already struggling. They've been lied to. They've been gaslit by their husband. Their world's turned upside down, right? They're feeling unwanted. They're feeling ugly. They're feeling discarded. It's incredibly offensive. And then you call it a sex addiction, right? How is their nervous system ever supposed to calm down with that, right? They're married to a sex addict, a porn addict. I mean, come on, nobody wants to be married to a sex or porn addict. How are you supposed to live your life constantly worrying about what he's looking at? Is he checking out her? Does he like women like that? It's no way to live. This is why I think we should start using the term, the correct term, the psychological term for sex addiction, which is actually called process addiction. And for those of you who've read my book or listened to my podcast, I talk about this a lot, but it's because I truly believe it's why we see the relapse rate so high and we see the recovery rate so low. And it's because I don't think we're focusing on the right pieces that are actually going to result in long-term sobriety, long-term recovery. So when we examine process addiction, in this episode, I'm going to talk about it in two different ways. I want to first talk about it from a recovery standpoint, but I also want to touch on why identifying and understanding your process addiction is critical to the recovery of your marriage. So first, let's start with the addict. If we're looking at process addiction, and we're actually going to call it a process addiction, the reason I like that is there's less of an emphasis on the behaviors that actually occurred, and there's more emphasis on how the heck did I let that happen? Right? How did I get to the point where I was sleeping with prostitutes, where I was having affairs, right? Like, what on earth was I thinking? Because most of these guys, they're madly in love with their wife. A lot of their affair partners were less attractive than their wife. If not all of their affair partners were less attractive than their wife. And so it's crazy when you think about it. Here they are risking everything, right? Destroying their family, their trust with their life partner, all to what? Sleep with somebody who's less attractive, who you can't even remember their name? It sounds nuts, but when we look at the processes that birth it, it starts to seem less crazy. And that's which is important because we need to understand how this happened. If you don't understand how this happened, how are you going to make sure that it doesn't happen again? So, for example, if we're tracing the processes back, right? If we're looking at some of these meaningless interactions, we have to figure out what the brain is after with these interactions, okay? There's a wide variety, and that's why I like calling it process addiction rather than sex or porn addiction, because again, sex or porn addiction oversimplifies it. It makes it about sex, it makes it about porn, which makes it harder to recover. But when you really look at what's driving the behaviors, it makes a lot more sense, and therefore you're actually able to overcome and change some of these faulty thought processes. And you'll be surprised, they will go back so far. I mean, almost all of the faulty processes stem from childhood events that happened in your youth and then compounded on themselves all the way through adulthood and never truly got resolved. And the irony is, hear the word childhood trauma, we always focus on these negative events. But again, trauma doesn't have to be a negative event. Trauma is just something that altered your course of your life, altered your thinking. So for example, one of the most common pieces of trauma that we see is the overemphasis on the value of having sex with girls. All through middle school, through high school, through college, there is this massive emphasis on getting laid as much as you can, getting laid by the hottest girl that you can get laid by. I'm not saying this affects every single male, but this is certainly a conversation amongst a lot of the male circles that I hung around. And then you see it again on television, on movies. There's this huge emphasis on what it would be like to be able to sleep with this woman, right? It's built up on this pedestal. And if we think about the trauma that will cause and what that can do to somebody's brain processes, it creates two things: an overemphasis on the value of a sexual interaction, but also on the flip side, it is creating a scarcity. Right? If we're talking about how hard it is to get laid and how hard it is to sleep with a super attractive female, it makes it scarce, right? So over here you have this massive amount of value, and then on the other side you have it's this scarce occurrence that's going to be hard to get. And you see this, right? There'll be men who through college are going out to bars with the primary objective of trying to get laid, right? We have people who will go on vacations to Las Vegas, to Mexico, and again, that's their objective, right? Can I get laid and how many times can I get laid? Now, if we're looking at that thought process, they expect getting married to stop it. And that is one of the most naive things I've ever heard, right? For multiple decades, you have been obsessed with trying to get laid and constantly trying to sleep with more and more progressively attractive women. You think that's just going to go away because you got married? You might want to think again. And if we focus on another process, you could be fishing for compliments. You could be searching for validation, right? Maybe you want to feel accomplished, successful, more desirable. Maybe you want to feel like the most superior man in the room. All of these processes stem from feeling inadequate, feeling like you're not good enough, feeling like the only way to live a successful life is to get 1% better every day. All of these kind of traumatic philosophies that we subscribe to when we're young lead us down all of these various paths. Now, there's one other thing I want to say for the guys who are hunting for their problematic thought processes. The other reason I don't like to call it a sex or porn addiction is I think when we zoom in too much on the actual behavior, we ignore how else these guys are engaging their process addiction. The truth is, the sexual behaviors oftentimes are like 1 or 2% of their process addiction. If you look at these men, a lot of the times they're engaging in the exact same process addiction in non-sexual ways. So if it's a guy who's searching for validation, superiority, compliments, this guy's going to be doing this at work. He's going to be doing it through making money. Maybe he's going to do it through buying nice clothes, buying nice cars, landing big contracts, winning awards at work. So he's still engaging in his process addiction. He is not okay unless he is getting better and better and getting validated for how good he's getting. You can look at another process on the same way. If we're going to look at a guy who has liking to escape, right? Somebody who's using sex and pornography as a way to cope with negative emotions, to escape from life. The truth is, sex and pornography are only going to be, again, a small 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% of their actual process addiction. On the other hand, they're scrolling on social media, wasting time. They're playing, maybe games on their phone. They're looking at investment properties to buy, cars on auction. We look at them engaging in pornography as the escape, but if you really look at the process addiction, there's a ton of escapism practices that they're using to get dopamine to vacate their life and kind of tune out, check out. So my point is, again, I think if we zoom in way too much, these guys get sexually sober. But again, if that's only 2% of their process addiction, what about the rest of it? And are we really safe just leaving it there? In my opinion, no, we're not. Because if you leave all those other problematic processes, the constant thirst for compliments, for validation, for attention, to get people to look at you and say nice things at you. If you're looking at your avoiding life, right? You're trying to numb out and check out and escape life and not feel your feelings. If we just focus on the sexual behaviors, we're leaving all this other stuff on the table, which in my opinion just places you at high risk, right? That's the difference between sobriety and recovery, right? Sobriety is finding a way to not do the sexual pieces, but recovery is, how do I not be an escapist at all? How do I live my life and feel my emotions and express my emotions? Or how do I live my life where I'm getting validation from me? I feel good enough. I'm validating myself rather than constantly needing other people to validate me. And I believe that's the issue with calling this sex and porn addiction, is we're kind of completely missing the mark, and we wonder why these guys are relapsing. Well, because the truth is the bulk of their addiction hasn't changed at all. It's just the sexual pieces that we've removed. So the second piece I wanted to talk to is the importance of identifying your process addiction and being able to explain it and articulate it to your wife. And I think this is absolutely critical for people who are trying to heal their marriage. Because again, look at how your wife feels, right? When you do this to your wife, she feels it's totally justified, right? She feels unwanted. She feels discarded. She feels disrespected, right? She feels like you don't respect her, that you don't respect women. Maybe she feels like you never loved her, right? How could you do this to me if you actually loved me? She might feel ugly. She might feel bad in bed. She might feel like you're bored with her. She might feel like you want someone younger, somebody more attractive, somebody with different hair color. These poor women, when this happens to them, and it's rightfully so that they would draw all these conclusions, right? Because if your marriage was so awesome and your sex life was so awesome, why would you do this to her? And that's why you need to be able to explain your process addiction, because if to her it seems very sexual and very personal, rightfully so. But if you're able to explain to her, hey, as I was doing some work with my recovery groups, I've been able to really uncover where this stems from. I don't feel good enough on my own. I constantly need validation. I need other people to tell me how accomplished I am. I need other people to be impressed with me. If I don't have that, I don't feel okay. And the reason that you need to articulate that to her is she's going to see it in all areas of your life, not just sexually, right? She's going to say, you know what? I see you do that when we're at work events and conferences and networking events. I see that when we are hosting parties at the house, you completely flip a switch and turn into a total people pleaser. And then same thing if we're going to go back to kind of the escapism, right? You can say, hey, I've started to realize that, when I'm stressed, uncomfortable, I feel like I'm under a lot of pressure, I tend to not feel understood, I feel isolated, and that's when I want to just kind of check out of my life. And then again, you're rattling off all of the objectives, right? I'm trying to distract myself. I don't want to think about anything. I don't want to talk about anything. I don't want to feel my feelings. I don't want to express my feelings. And then you can describe all the things you do. Hey, I'll read a book, I'll go golf. And you start explaining to her all the things that you do so that you don't have to deal with the stress, the emotions, whatever it is. So again, there's primarily talked about like 2 avenues of process addiction, but the truth is your process addiction can be anything and everything. There's such a wide variety of mental processes that men have become addicted to. Some of those result in sexual behaviors, some don't. Some will result in substance addiction. Some will result in a gambling addiction. Some will result in an eating disorder. We never know where these faulty processes are going to take us, but some do result in some sexual acting out. And so if guys are really going to recover from this, to me, they need to look at the entirety of their process addiction. I really believe that. I think if you don't turn over every stone, I think you're going to be leaving things on the table, and I think you are at a high risk of relapse. And if we're talking about healing the marriage and your wife, a lot of guys, they're in recovery for a year or 2, 3, and they haven't acted out. They have not relapsed, but their wife still doesn't trust them. And these guys are like, what the heck? What's going on? What more can I do? I'm going to 1 to 2 12-step meetings every week. I've got multiple therapists, couples therapist. I got my personal therapist. I'm going to 1 or 2 intensives every year, right? This is what I did. I did everything and anything I could. And it still wasn't good enough for my wife. And that was when I discovered process addiction. And the second I started really uncovering what my brain is after every single day, that was when my wife finally started to feel like I had a grip on this thing, right? Because she wasn't wrong. In the beginning, I wasn't recovered. I was just sober. I was avoiding the sexual pieces. But it was when I really started digging in and understanding, you know what? Most of this is not sexual. Most of this is a process addiction that presents in so many other ways, not sexually. And that was what scared her. Her nervous system, and you guys have probably seen it. These ladies, their nervous system, they're not dumb. They can pick up on this stuff. And so while you might be sexually sober, they might not feel like you're recovered. And oftentimes, they're probably right. So rather than defending yourself, really ask, have I discovered my process addiction? Do I know all of the faulty brain processes? Have I discovered all of them? And do I know the psychologically proven treatments that are going to be able to get these faulty processes out of my life? And most importantly, are you doing the things that are actually going to remove them? Are you really, truly doing the work? And if you can say yes to all those things, okay. But the truth is, if you can say yes to everything that I just said, your wife probably isn't doubting your recovery. She probably thinks you're in great recovery. So again, for all you guys, if you've gotten the question from your wife, hey, are you even in good recovery? I still don't feel safe with you. Before you go defending yourself, stop and think for a second. Is there some truth to what she's saying? Have I truly eliminated all of these faulty thought processes from my life?